Hello, I'm Debbie Bell-Hosking for FinextraTV here at Sibos 2022 in Amsterdam, and we're talking tokenization. Joining me is Georg Schneider and also Valeria Zafar of Digital Asset.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Lovely to meet you both, and welcome to the studio.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So tokenization, yeah? Is it hype or is this trend real?
Sure, so maybe I can take this one first. From our experience, having been in the industry for around 8 years at this stage, what's really changed is that it's no longer hype. Majority of the use case projects that we work with our customers have in some shape or form to do with tokenization. Now, what is tokenization? A lot of people sometimes associate it with crypto, with other types of digital assets. Some think it's just issuance. But I think what's really important to highlight is that tokenization is not just about the creation of the asset and origination of the particular asset using smart contracts technology and other types of blockchain technology, but it's also about formulating the different life cycle events of that security on the token, so you can create that efficiency from the start.
We're talking about, so I mean the word there is efficiency from the start. Is that why, in your opinion, more financial institutions are moving towards tokenization? Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's largely driven by operational efficiencies that tokenization promises, and those efficiencies really come into play when, as Valeria mentioned, when you're not only tokenizing the representation of ownership of a security, but also how that security evolves over time. So the full life cycle of that security, if that can be brought onto a distributed ledger and mutualized between the parties, you remove all the possibilities for breaks and discrepancies and all the friction that exists in the current processes.
Okay, great. Now for the technical question. Tokenization, how does it work? If I go to you, please. Or
right.
Shall I go to you, Georg?
I'll
take
that
the brains to answer the question, yeah.
So from a technical perspective, in a nutshell, what you need is you need technology that's fit for regulated assets. So it has to stand up to regulatory requirements and has to enable you to tokenize these assets in a compliant way. And on the very foundation of it, you need ledger technology that preserves the privacy of participants, that is consistent, and that fulfills the regulatory requirements around finality. On top of that, you need a programming framework to actually encode the tokens and assets as smart contracts, and to encode the aforementioned business logic and logic to lifecycle the asset throughout. And ideally, on top of that, you also have some tokenization framework that standardizes how these assets are represented and how they move between parties. So these three components, I would argue, are necessary on a technical level to do a successful tokenization project.
So what you've described, does it require an overhaul of the legacy infrastructure?
Not really. Typically what we see in the market and what we also suggest our customers to do is to adopt the new technology gradually. So not to introduce things in a big bang, to change the operating model completely for their participants, because that's usually a non-starter. Like, nobody wants to have huge capital expenditure just to get started playing. So what we suggest and what we see the market doing is taking a gradual approach where you keep the existing infrastructure and you integrate with it, so that over time you can incrementally move to the new technology and start to gain those efficiencies that tokenization promises.
If I can just also add from a practical perspective, what varies significantly is what are you looking to tokenize. So we've seen tokenization of simple bonds, fixed income securities, to private equity, private debt. A lot of the things we work with are in the ESG space, green bonds and stuff like that. But also a lot are looking to tokenize and originate new types of assets. So credit offsets and tokenization is of those types of securities is quite popular among a lot of infrastructures due to kind of evolution and kind of certain trends from the Paris Agreement and a driver of that. That is brand new infrastructure, right? So it's less around integrating it into existing and changing those different functionalities for traditional assets, but rather building brand new for brand new markets to help with the supply and the buy side of those types of securities.
So let's now look in the future. What's needed for everything you've described and tokenization to reach its full potential?
Right, so I would say what participants need to do is start adopting the technology, and that can be a gradual approach. They might initially maybe connect to a platform through APIs and only at a later point decide to actually take full ownership of a participant node in a network to actually get direct access to the tokenized asset. Now, in terms of what is required of tokenized assets themselves, I think, as Valeria mentioned earlier, capturing the full life cycle of an asset from inception all the way to maturity or redemption of the asset, that is where most efficiencies are gained, because that is where a lot of the friction in current financial markets comes from and a lot of the problems that we're dealing with and that we're trying to solve. So if you're able to capture that full life cycle end to end, that allows you to really decommission all those systems that are currently involved, that have been, in operation for 10, 20 years, that have really created a lot of baggage, operational burden, and inefficiencies. And if you're able to replace these systems with a completely on-ledger tokenized process, that's where you gain the most efficiencies. But as I mentioned, I think it's a gradual step of adoption, and only over time those efficiencies will materialize.
I think if I can add, what we've seen quite successfully working is a great example. Clearstream's D7 platform, their approach has been very kind of a hybrid and staged. So they had original registry system. Earlier this week they've announced successful introduction of the issuance functionality and the first trades going through that. They've engaged their participants from the very beginning, right, as they embarked on the journey, so that they were educated, so that they were bought on their idea, and as a result of that, there is buy-in from them as well. And we've seen that be working quite well, and we hope to see more of that in other initiatives as well.
Oh, it's great to hear about that real example as well, so that everything you've spoken about we can actually put together in a picture of action.
For sure, for sure.
Well, Georg and Valeria, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.